Well, hello again, friends. Welcome to our Aquarium Online Academy. My name is James. I'm from the Education Department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. We're having a great day today. Last class of today is going to be an interesting one. You read that right. It's going to be a mackerel dissection. I almost said squid, but that's not today. Today's not for squid. Today's for mackerel. Well, don't worry, it is an educational program, but it is a real fish that we're going to open up. So if you're a little squeamish, you don't really want to watch that kind of thing, I suggest watching one of our earlier programs from today. No harm, no foul. But if you're going to stay tuned, guess what? You can ask questions during the class. Right here, my magic invisible hands, will show you those in a minute. These are gloves because we're going to do dissection, but the gloves are green. The magic of the internet, folks. All right, questions. 562-286-1838. My friend Carrie is going to be giving those questions to the studio so we can answer them for you live on the air. If you're not watching live, you can still email us questions at live@lbaop.org. Well, Jen's controlling the computer with all the fun pictures that you can't see my hands pointing at. So let's take a look at some actual mackerel that live here at the aquarium. Don't worry, these are not harmed in any way, but these are good examples of sea life that we can take a look at. We're going to be talking about the adaptations of the mackerel, body parts, and some of the things that we're going to be looking for on the actual body. Now, I put my gloves on in preparation for this class, but now I realize that I can't actually point at anything. So I'm going to use my whale of science to point. It's always a great day at the aquarium, folks. Where's our mackerel at? They school, so let's watch for a group of fish that come through. Mackerel really don't hang out by themselves. They are up there, right there, up in the top. So the mackerel school, so they have to know what each other are doing. They have to be able to sense what a school is doing. We'll talk about how fish school. Now, this is one of my favorite times of day to watch Blue Cavern because we have the skylights. You can actually see the light coming in right here. We have all sorts of different fish. Carrie brought me some not green gloves. If you want to see my hands, I think we're good, but you know. Okay, Jen, we can't see any mackerel. Okay, we're gonna try and find mackerel on our Blue Cavern exhibit, but let's talk about some factors that fish have. What do fish move to swim around? How do they swim? They have legs for swimming? Now we have legs for swimming. They have fins. So we're going to take a look at the fins of the mackerel, and they have different kinds of fins than we might expect. Or if you go fishing, you might have actually seen fins like these before, or if you know a lot about fish, you might have seen something like this before. How do they breathe? What are these things that they're using? Not lungs, they're using gills. So we're going to take a closer look at fish gills too. All right. What else do mackerel need to survive? Mainly, we got breathing down, we got moving down. Eating. You have to be able to eat food, or if you're a plant, you can make energy from sunlight. So they have to be able to feed on things. We're going to take a look at how they feed. Now, if we can find the reproductive organs, we can talk about how they have babies. But if we don't get to that part, that's okay. There's still a lot to learn about a mackerel. They have their 5 senses just like we do, so we can talk about how they do all of that. But they also have kind of these accessory special parts that allow them, like we said, to see what the other members of the school are doing. All right, so we found where they're at in our webcam. So this is a different time of day. You can actually rewind our webcam if you would like to. They're back here. It would take me more effort to try and change my gloves than use my magic pointing whale. All right. So the mackerel are schooling. Now, if a fish changes direction, if you're in the lead and you just start doing this, the other fish follow. And how do they do that? If you're out in the wind, can you feel the wind blowing through your hair? Yes. You have little nerves attached to each one of your hairs. Well, they have this special organ on the side of their body. Well, let's go to our actual mackerel, where you can actually see my hands. See? We have green gloves for doing stuff here, so that's why they didn't show up on the screen. Well, let's take a look at our mackerel. Now, the lighting is not the perfect part, but here we go. We can actually see in the contrast here a part of our mackerel. Do you see this line right here? That is called the lateral line. Now, the lateral line is a special sensory organ. So, all along right here is where they can feel what the rest of the school are doing. So, if we had a microscope, we could zoom in, and there's these little tiny hair-like projections that will sense what the other fish are doing. All right, Jen thinks she found the schooling effect, so let's take a closer look. So we paused our webcam so we can make sure we get it right on the dot. Check that out. There's going to be some more coming around. So the schooling effect is where they all are grouped together going one direction. If you were watching our fish program earlier, we kind of talked about that. Schooling is when they all will stay in the same direction along the same pathway. So here they come back around the back. They're making a big loop. You'll be able to see them right here real soon. And if some change direction, it doesn't have to be even the leader. If some of them start to change direction, the rest of them are going to change direction too. Or the school might split and then regroup back together. That's kind of how schooling fish work. So if you're in a group, they're going to come back this way. If you're in a group, it's easier to confuse predators to try and not be able to find one individual out of that group. So that's one way they're using some of their senses, is that they can sense the world around them. Let's go back to our real fish. Now, the other senses they have, they do have eyes. Now, their lens is a little bit different than our lens. It doesn't do the same thing. So our lens will slightly change shape in order for us to see. Now, if I remember correctly, their lens will actually move in their eye to change where they focus. So they do have eyes. They can see very well underwater. They have their lateral line. They have their fins. So let me get my nice pointing tools. Now, this is the pectoral fin, the one on the side, kind of like our chest muscles are called the pectoral muscle. This is their pectoral fin. And you can actually fan it out, and you can see the little rays of their fins. They're in the ray finned group. Now, the cool part is their dorsal fin. Now, Jen doesn't like doing mackerel dissections because she got part of this fin stuck in her hand one time. This fin doesn't always stick up. They can lay it down like you saw in Blue Cavern, but they can stick it up, and it is quite sharp, so we don't really want to poke it too hard, but this is another one of their fins. Back here, they have some more of the pointy dorsal fins. Let me grab some tweezers so my finger's out of the way. We can see that a little bit better. See? There we go. So if you ever caught one, you can actually run your finger and feel their fins. But remember, their fins have little bones in them. You have to be careful that you don't poke yourself with them too hard. Now, this Pacific mackerel has kind of like a stripe effect on the back. Let's turn the light up on them. And there we go. We can see the stripes here on the back of their body. Kind of like you might describe like a tiger stripe. So this is how we know this is a Pacific mackerel. Spanish mackerel kind of have this all kind of one bland tone body, but yellowy fins. So if they have kind of yellowy fins, but just one tone, we've had Spanish mackerel before. But this is how we can tell it's a Pacific mackerel. Okay, let's start looking at the inside of our fish, because we wanted to talk more about how it survives and the other adaptations it has. Well, we're going to have to look inside the mouth. So I'm going to put my second glove back on. Well, new glove. We don't really reuse gloves in science. That's not how you do protective equipment. Now, in their mouth, do you think they have a tongue? They do. Now, let's see if I can angle the fish so we can actually see in the mouth. Ooh. Yeah, so there's the tongue right in the middle there. It's kind of silvery. Let's turn the light down a touch. Okay. So they do have a tongue. Tongues help things swallow. But what do you think they eat? Do you see any big teeth in this thing? Now, I'm running my finger through their mouth, and it kind of feels rough, almost serrated like a knife would be, but it's not really teeth in their mouth. So what do you think it eats if it doesn't have teeth? Well, if you don't have teeth, then you can't grind your food up. You have to be able to just swallow it whole. Well, they do that. They swallow plankton. So as they swim around, they'll hang their mouth wide open, and they'll just let a lot of water shove through their mouth and come out the gill operculum, and they will be catching plankton. Jen's favorite thing to talk about, plankton. So they will catch plankton, and as the water flows through the body, it'll exit out the gill, and they'll just kind of start catching food inside in what are called the gill rakers. So we can open up the gills, the gill operculum a little bit, and you can kind of see that they have these gills in here. They have multiple layers too. So let me use my little probe to help pull up the different layers. They have different layers. Now we're going to open up more so we can take a closer look. Right now we just are looking at the external anatomy of our fish. Well, there's a couple ways you can do a dissection. One way is you can kind of do it, I'm putting that back in, kind of do it like if you caught a fish and you were going to clean it. So you can cut along the belly side, like I've already started this fish, and then you just kind of open it up like a fish taco. That is not how they make fish tacos. Point of fact. The other way you can do it is you can open up, I need my pointing whale. I have my glove on again. You can open up a big square right here, which I've done on another fish. So let's look at what a fish already opened up would look like. And then we'll go back to our unopened fish and check that out. Ooh, sciencey. I love it. All right. We're going to turn the lights down a little bit so we can see the body parts better. So when we just open up the side of the fish, we can see their different organs in here. And here's the gill operculum removed. So if we compare to our non-open fish, this is kind of what we would have. You cut a big square right here, and you can cut off the gill operculum. All right. So let's see if we can identify some parts to a fish. What other organs can you think of besides gills would a fish have? So here's our gills. Let's take a little bit closer look at the gills now that it's open. So each one is kind of a thin layer, and we're going to take one of these out. Each one is a thin layer. It helps them breathe. There's a lot of blood that will be passing through the gills, and that's so they can exchange their oxygen for carbon dioxide. They're getting rid of the carbon dioxide, getting the oxygen. And this is how they breathe. This is also, coincidentally, how they, what we would consider going to the bathroom, they will get rid of nitrogen waste or ammonia through their gills. They still have an anus, so they can get rid of food waste. That would be back there. But these gills help them get rid of ammonia, also get rid of carbon dioxide. Now, the cool thing about cutting the fish open in this way, if you just open it up from the belly side, you don't really get to see the spine. So let's see if we can zoom in a little bit on just the spine. Okay, I'm going to brighten it up a tiny bit. We get kind of a reflective effect from the fish. Now, the spine, like in our back, is in the very back of our back. You can feel it when you touch yourself in the back, right here. But a fish, hey, you can see my hand shadow. A fish spine is right where my shadow's at. Whereas this is the very back of the fish, but the spine is right here. That's a little bit different than we might expect. In a lot of land vertebrates, animals with backbones, the back is in the very back of the animal. But in a fish, it's not quite in the exact very back of the animal. It's got a little bit of space left. And this is where the spinal cord is. So then where the brain connects to the rest of the nerves down the length of the body, that's where their spine and their spinal cord are going to be. I'm going to zoom back out. Woo! And we'll brighten our fish up a little bit. Try and... Oh, that's too bright. There we go. What other organs can you recognize or even question about what might be in our fish? Jen said pyloric Zika. Were you thinking pyloric Zika? Maybe not, which is why you're watching a fish dissection. You want to learn what the pyloric Zika are. Well, the Zika is part of the intestine where they can absorb nutrients, materials, but also helps with digestion. Now, if we try to follow different body parts, okay, we have intestines, we have the stomach in here, we have the swim bladder in here too. And the nice thing about having a non-preserved fish is that the colors are all still what they should be. Now, with you looking through this webcam, the colors are a little bit different than what I see. It's not quite as red in my camera, or in front of me, but on the camera, it's going to be a little bit more red. Okay. Now, a swim bladder, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit better to the swim bladder. A swim bladder is kind of like, if you know about diving, the buoyancy vest, the BCD, buoyancy control device that they wear. And it's a little balloon right there. So the balloon, they can actually inflate, and it helps them float, just like you would think of a ballast tank helps a boat move up or down in the water. The swim bladder helps them move up and down in the water. Now, the cool thing is, only bony fish that we know of have swim bladders, but not all the bony fish. There's a few exceptions that don't. None of the shark and rays have swim bladders. They use liver oil, so their livers will produce oil to help them float. But also, some sharks will take gulps of air at the surface to give them a little bit of buoyancy, and then they'll have to burp it back out at some point if they want to sink again. So sharks have figured out that they can swallow air to do this, whereas the fish have an organ specifically all for that. Now, the reason that this is kind of cool, having a swim bladder, is that in the evolutionary history of fish, the sharks and rays have been around a lot longer than the bony fish. So bony fish developed this part of their body, and the sharks and rays never did. That's a pretty interesting adaptation to have, and have the different body parts and abilities than the other fish the sharks and rays have in their environment. All right, now I said we're going to take a look at one of the gills, so let's see if we can take one of the gills out. I'm just going to try and pull one straight out. They're not connected too deeply. I'm going to use my scissors because it is a little more stuck than I thought. All right, scissors, my dissection scissors are right here. So the cool part about their gills is that this is how they are feeding on plankton. Check this out. So when it sits in their cheek, okay, this part down here, this is the gill that is a part of the gill that is absorbing oxygen. And then this kind of pokey part right here in the inside of the gill is called the gill raker. This is the filtering mechanism that collects plankton while they swim through the water. And then each layer has different amounts of gill on there. But it looks like, if we take out the next layer of gill, let's see if we have gill rakers on the next layer. So if you go farther into the gills, okay, are there any gill rakers on the next layer down? Almost. We're going to have to zoom in and find out. Whee. Okay, here we go. That's how short they are on the next layer in. So the first layer had really long gill rakers. The next one, they're extremely small and short. So the first layer catches the most stuff. The next layer might catch some of the smaller things. Kind of like having multiple layers of filters in like an air duct or in an aquarium. Different layers can collect different sizes of particles. That's really cool that we can actually see the differences in the size of gill rakers from one layer to the next. And even when we zoomed in on here, you can see there's lots of little bristles on this. It's not just little sticks sticking up in the air to grab stuff. They're bristly so that they can catch all the little tiny plankton. That's really interesting when you get to really zoom in on it. All right, we're going to zoom back out. Don't forget, if you do have questions, you can text them into us. You can also email us at live@lbaop.org. Now, every once in a while, we can open up the stomach to look at the insides, but the stomach doesn't have a whole lot of thickness to it, so I don't think there's much in there. They may have had plankton, but, I mean, we could try. But I think you'd rather want to look at the heart, which is up here. So they do have a heart. Their heart is simple compared to ours. Our heart has, there he goes, way back up in here. Our heart has 4 chambers so that we can pump freshly oxygenated blood to one side of the body, and the oxygen-poor blood goes to the rest of the part of the body. So oxygen-rich blood goes out of our left side of our heart into our body, and the right side of our heart pumps to the lungs. Well, they don't have a 4-chambered heart. They just have to have it go in a loop. So their heart is simplified. I think it only has 1 to 2 chambers, depending on the kinds of fish you are. And it just has the blood pass through the gills to the body, back to the heart, to the gills, to the body, back to the heart. in a loop so that it's not really exchanging left side, right side. So in some animals, they have a series of one-chambered hearts, like earthworms. In other animals, they just have a big one-chambered heart. Or you can be like an amphibian and you have a three-chambered heart. And it mixes in the middle. So that it comes in from both sides and it mixes in the middle and it goes to the rest of the body. So different kinds of animals have different complexities of hearts, which is a kind of interesting thing to think about, how these animals have adapted and changed over time and developed some of these different parts to their body. I mean, the fish have changed completely from sharks and rays to bony fish. There's a lot of extra parts that the other fish don't have. But there's a lot of characteristics that are shared too. So these gill rakers will be visible in some sharks and rays that eat plankton, like whale sharks or manta rays. They eat plankton too. Okay. Well, I think this part right here that I'm holding is the liver. The heart should be up here. And when you think about their bodies, they have to live in an environment that has to survive with a lot of the same factors that we do. Remember, we talked about that. You have to be able to get oxygen, they have to be able to eat, they have to be able to reproduce, be able to move around at different times. So their bodies have a lot of the same parts that ours do. They're just either more complex or less complex, or they're simplified compared to what we need. Now, I had some questions coming in. Bella's wondering where the heart is. Hopefully we helped you with that, Bella. It's kind of up right around here where the gills are at. Okay, but it's not a heart shape like ours is kind of a heart shape. So when we draw hearts, like the fun hearts for like Valentine's Day or on our notebooks or whatever, that heart shape we draw is kind of a replica of our heart. Our heart's kind of more of a diamond triangle pattern, okay? But it's not quite the same as ours. So if we extracted the heart, it wouldn't even look like what you might recognize of a human heart. Now, do all fish have their backbone kind of in the middle here, where actually the lateral line is? And as far as I know, most of them do. Sharks and rays, it might be a little bit closer to their back, but a lot of the bony fish, it's right where the lateral line is at. In other fish, the lateral line kind of arches and moves around, and their spine can do that too. Let's take a look at, let's have Jen pull up a spiny lumpsucker, a very different shaped fish than a mackerel. Yeah, she's going to find a picture of it. I surprised her with that. So we'll take a look at a different shaped fish, and we'll try and figure out if we can figure out where the spine is going to be. And it says, is it known why it's located there instead of, like us, in the very back of their back? Well, if you think about what the lateral line is doing, it's a sensory organ. Now, some scientists, it's kind of weird and fun, but we're already got the gross factor up there on the top of the screen. Scientists consider eyeballs just an extension of our brain. It's not like some people like say the window into us, but it's really just an extension, a little dangly part of our brain sticking out of our head. So our eyes are an extension of nerves that come out to our front, and so that we can see. Well, the lateral line is an extension of their spinal cord. So if it's very far away in certain distances, it changes how long the signal takes to get to the spinal cord. So it's really advantageous. The closer your lateral line is to the spinal cord, the faster those signals can travel. Now this is kind of instead of a football fusiform shaped fish, this is more like a golf ball with pokey bits. So where's the spine? Do you see a lateral line on this fish? You actually kind of can. So follow my fingers, like right, and this time you can see my fingers, so this works better. Right here, and it kind of curves. So like our spine has a little bit of curve to it. Well, guess what? Some fish have a kind of curved spine. Because if they have a more rounded body, that might be part of what they need. Another interesting fish that might have more rounded spine to them are the trigger fish. They kind of have this horizontal diamond pattern. So they're kind of elongated diamond from front to back. And because of so much of their body is their head, their spine kind of curls and tapers back almost like this one does. So we can even still see on this tiny little fish, they have a lateral line. Now I say tiny because this fish might be about an inch and a half long. It's literally not bigger than a ping pong ball. Other kinds of lumpsucker fish are bigger, but this one is not. They're one of my favorite fish that we have here. They're really cool. The other cool thing about them is that if you looked at an x-ray of them, all the little spines are rigid and hard, so they show up on an x-ray like ribs do on our x-rays. That's pretty cool. Now we don't have a picture of that, so you might not need the help of an adult later on if you want to Google or find a x-ray picture on the internet of a spiny lump sucker, you can. It's really cool. I recommend you try it and check it out. So, how is this fish the same as the mackerel? Now, we can't dissect one of them because it'd be too small and difficult to try and see anything good. The smaller the things are that you try to dissect in science, it gets pretty tough, and you have to have really delicate abilities to try and open them up. When I was taking my zoology class in college, we dissected everything from roundworms, earthworms, insects, even a rat. So we had to compare across all the different kinds of animals the internal body parts, which was kind of cool. But if you don't have a very soft touch when you dissect things, you can make it so that you can't really tell what anything is on the inside of that animal. So you have to be kind of careful, and this might be a factor that you do or do not like about dissections. But as you want to get into science, if you have to do a dissection, softer is a little bit better than trying to cut, like cutting through paper or cutting through fabric. You want to be a little more delicate when you have an animal for a dissection, because otherwise we'd never see anything good inside that fish if I cut too aggressively into it. It's not like cutting a steak. We want to be able to see the body parts. And scientists, in some cases, they scan animals instead of dissecting them. This is something that's cool that's come across, is that in some cases they do an MRI of the animal. They don't have to open it up and do anything that we did, because once you open it, I mean, we saw the one fish where some things were kept trying to poke out, because the body's trying to keep all the things in, and if you open up the body, they try to come out. So to keep it in the same shape it's supposed to be, some scientists are doing MRI scans of animals. And that can be really helpful too. One scientist figured this out with dolphins and whales, is that they can learn a lot more from an MRI scan than if they try to do a dissection to learn about the internal organs. So there's a large array of different things people are doing to learn about what things inside animals look like and what they're doing. So if that part is too gross, you could actually be the person that helps scan animals. So there's a lot of different ways that you can learn about wildlife. Here's an x-ray of not a fish. This is a penguin. But we have the ability to x-ray our animals here. That's kind of the cool thing. We don't do that to our animals. That is an educational prospect so that we can learn about an animal that's already passed away. That one actually came from the freezer here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. It's the same kind of fish that we would feed out to our animals. And we get extra ones that we can use for dissections with you. But if we need to learn more about our animals, we can use x-rays. We can actually take our penguins over to another facility to do MRIs. And if we need to do surgery on an injured animal, we have 3 vet doctors here that can help do that. We can even sometimes bring in specialists. But we wouldn't know about penguins like this if somebody didn't study them before us. So there is an educational need in some cases for opening up mackerel. Okay, that thing, yeah. So if you have any more lingering questions about our mackerel dissection, please feel free to message us. You can email us at live@lbaop.org. There's a few other resources. If you researched more about mackerel on the internet, you could look up a lot more stuff about them. They are pretty common fish, so there's a lot of information about them if you want to learn more about the mackerel species of fish. All right, let's go to our webcam, and we can have our last minute together, just kind of checking out the cool animals underwater. Now, we also do squid dissections here in our Aquarium Online Academy. So if you check back to some of our older videos, you can probably find a squid dissection. But we also have future classes coming up, so keep an eye out for anything of our topics that you're looking to learn a whole lot more about. And for all of us here at the Aquarium Pacific, we thank you for joining us, and keep learning and having fun, my friends. But always ask questions, because that's what scientists do. We ask questions and learn. So keep asking questions and trying to investigate your answers. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your Thursday afternoon.